So here we are. Do you want to start, Pablo, towards
Yes,
your Oxel drafting?
yeah, so I was working a bit more on my Oxel explanation, or yeah, how should we call it? Learn Oxel by playing Oxels into existence.
Mhm.
I changed a bit the definition, so now I will read the first part and then I will tell you the Oxel I made. So it is, perceive your surrounding and focus on something that catches your attention. It can be an object, a system, a concept, or something else. I actually don't know what something else could be, but yeah, it could be something else. Name the thing and ask yourself lightly, how is this thing affecting the world? What are its potential capacities? So I was playing around with this, just creating some oxels. And with this added sentence of it can be an object, a system, a concept, or something else, I think you can start to think not only of like objects around you, but also of systems around you.
Mhm.
So I tried to define the state as an oxel. So then the quality of the state is that it forcefully identifies individuals to direct their agency. And that's the state oxel, nation state oxel, I guess.
But that is already playable. Like this is like let me see if I can describe it in a kind of useful way. So the one thing, and this might be useful in your precisely your Oxel direction, is like there's this whole culture of writing shorter towards the particularly kind of the modern RPG models. Like you get mm, uh, like like some character or some weird creature is, let's say, is spouting with lava, and nothing else is said about it. And but then the point is precisely like, okay, so then the game master is like, okay, they make some kind of an instance happening of that. Like you see this creature, then and like you can see lava spatters in the wall and so on, and through play, like the characters interacting with it, like the details come out, they are emerging. But the spouting with lava is kind of like a not really a lighthouse in the shackling manner that things might move elsewhere, but it seems to work quite well as kind of like setting the direction like loosely. Maybe it's a road sign, like it's a starting point rather than an end point. Um, and I think that like why people like this area seems to partly be that you actually get quite rich stuff out of that, and then it sets up a very interesting relation with expression. Is like when you're saying that, like for example, you're saying that for the nation, that's a direction to play and maybe further define the Oxel, but you've set the like the road sign of where it walks first, and therefore affected it like potentially quite strongly. Like the first steps matter more in terms of general direction than the later steps. And
Yeah,
I
and the shorter the description, the larger the room for imagination
hmm,
and for the co-creation of that definition, right?
yeah, yeah, like and so in this sense, like stealing, loaning some of the practices from their like approach to expression and mutating them. Like I think there is a lot to take, but also there's clearly some things to develop further and variate. Um, but it has this root of like, yes, like two words or even one word can be enough of a description for a complex situation if there is play afterwards, and that play can lead to adding to the description itself.
Amazing. You should jump towards
Yeah,
your
yeah, let's
Oxel. I'm
yeah.
curious.
All right. So, oh wait, you have to talk amongst it. I had a alarm bell or like a buzzer. Just a second.
Go.
Yeah.
We can talk about our dreams. We were talking about our dreams before hitting record. I had a dream where I was at school and I had to draw Dracula's castle from memory, but my paper was too coarse for my soft pencil, so I just couldn't draw it. And the time was running out, and it was super frustrating. And in my head, I think now I'm remembering I wanted to draw the castle from the cover of Castlevania, which I don't know if it actually has a very distinct castle. I think it does, but it was an absolute disaster of a dream. Holy shit, there's a Netflix series? That sucks. Fuck. But yeah, that's it. You want to add something, Leo?
Hi. That's it.
Oh, come on. You have to be better. They probably come to my door, so I might be kind of interrupted for a few seconds. Yes. So now you have to do better.
Oh, shoot. I don't know, man. I don't know. No. You go.
Let's.
I
I took notes from your dreams, so we could try oxelizing some of them.
am
So
true.
you had this move, Leo, of shifting the meaning of your dreams setting. So kind of like the setting remains, but you can jump basically from a fashion show to a terrorist attack just by a shift in the meaning, which I found really interesting.
Well, it wasn't. I mean, it was. It. Well, I wasn't turning it into a terrorist attack, but that. Yeah, I don't know. I think it was also just interesting how the kind of the conversations we also have about like utopia and like how it collapses or something, because the general tendency is like move and then like flourishing, but then there's some trajectories here that are hiding underneath the like that are guiding the movement of the system, and there comes a contradiction where what started off as beautiful becomes like terrifying, and then another move is required in order to like transform that setting into a new trajectory as well, which I think also like comes back also to some of the things regarding like absolute failure of a system. We were talking about some time ago. But yeah, I don't know, like oxalizing that. What's an approach we might how might we approach that? What's the we take
Just choose one of its qualities.
yeah, well, I guess this speculative trajectory taking. That's an oxel right there.
Could we do like that we press pause that we can return to that topic, but then we do the introduction for Pablo before he leaves to the bus. So while that introduction to the other sharing is going on, this can wait because it's an
Yes.
interesting topic, but we can return to it.
But let's press pause. Let's press
Yeah,
pause.
Not stop, but pause. All right, so I will also press share the screen. So like I said, this is more of an information dump, but like beyond the dump itself, there is more like in between the dumped stuff. So I made this mental exercise, like I think it was yesterday, of visiting Gym, which Leo might not be too familiar because it's sort of a blast from the past, but might be familiar after this, as an Oxel. And there are many reasons actually why to make it an Oxel. We can visit that. But I first dumped everything in and haven't really kind of like decently approached the question of how does it affect the expression, although I don't think it's a problem but it's more like a possibility. But okay, so the key thing here with a crude term meta is kind of like reasoning of, first of all, why gem and what is gem, um, and the key points there to put as kind of more like coordinating perspectives. This was the idea, is that you set certain perspectives as kind of position the gem in itself. So the meme versus gem is that in its heart, meme has a representative interaction. That is, you are a spectator of a meme, viewer, reader, whatever. Whereas in its heart, gem has a generative heart, that the interaction is you are a player. So this, I just pulled some old stuff. Could have made new ones, but it's a dump, so we can work with that. Is like this particular version above is not ready by itself, but rather you have to generate from it to actually produce something. So here it was that there was an entity, and it had a name, title, and then it had certain bullet points to define it, like and there were queries, like the behavior of the entity defines the sort of behavior of a city in a very crude fashion, and then there's query of sites within the city, and then there are things with exclamation points, which are more like roughly quests, tasks, goals, really. And all of those are kind of guiding structures that kind of work roughly in the memetic context, but all of them are pushing towards this, like this is not the thing. What you get is not the thing, but it's the ingredients of developing a thing. But okay, that's a starting point. But there, what opens up from there is an interesting direction of play, and I'll talk about this a bit more generally to open this up as a concept, and then go to the oxelization of it in a second. So if you're playing this, but then you think of playing cultures or playing structures, playing architectures like role-playing, well, this could be a generation of a place. It could also be a generation of an particular entity, a character, or really anything else, generation of an object. But those kind of games think of those objects as part of a setting. So whatever the gem, which now the reason why it's named version R is because there can be different kinds of gems, and the R is here kind of a rough association with the style of role-playing, that using those kind of architectures that, like, okay, you're generating towards the gem, but the gem in itself can allocate for other gems, spreads of gems, like multiple things, like this kind of a thing, but also something that is raw, is just an image, but then you set just a goal to it that this is an object. So the only thing it maybe reads is exclamation point and an object. And then this, and now you have like things generating towards the same setting essentially. But then that opens up a huge doorway of infinity, which is like the setting as to the size of like a world of worlds. But then it also opens up this possibility of play architectures, is like actually to approach this world of worlds, like somebody introduces the first situation by setting up a spread of genes, and then that generates an area to play, and others can enter it by roles, like just to mirror the role-playing pattern as an example, but it's not the only pattern. Like I also thought about this like as a solo play, that you're playing gems almost like a spread of a tarot, but towards generating a setting. But the setting might not be world-like, or can be, but could also be an abstract construction. So that's a very quick condensation of the possibilities that open there, all start from the switching from representative to generative, that the representation is not the thing itself, and the only generation is not make another meme that is also representative, but actually the gene itself is generated. And then going from there of what are the structural possibilities of what they generate, and then how do you play with that generation itself. Okay, so then my question became like, okay, if to introduce an Oxel, one introduction you could do is introduce the gene itself as a playable thing, like an offering to the world. What would you communicate there? And that led to first these sort of perspectives to tell what it is. There was a thing that I had in my head, but I didn't have the guts to write down the sentence that memes are boomerish, so we need genes. But I say it out loud because it's kind of true. Like because memes are boomerish because they are part of the representative continuation of culture. And for all their interest, this heart of representation makes them boomerish. But yeah, I said it, it's dirty, but moving. But
memes are the new TV.
yes, memes are the new TV. That's even better. Yes, yeah, certainly better than the boomers. But then, okay, so you have this meta, then you have an example, then you have something rather simple, which is like, okay, like how could you make them? Like recipes in a way, like what can you do with text? Well, you can put text inside and you can put text outside, but then you could also think of the outside as a place of growth. Like, you know, you put the image, maybe there's some text inside, but there's like something outside, like underneath it, and then that's a place of growth that others could add to. And of course, you can do both inside and outside. The head and tail was this sort of structuring, like a super simple way of building like a rough category and an area of growth, which is like title and bullets. So there's actually a lot of power to that, but I won't nerd out about that. But then there was another example, but maybe I'll move beyond that because that's also old. And I made these basic moves. The one move is the desk with a C, which is simply description. And of course, this can be, as said earlier, inside, outside, and it can use bullet points in itself. But it's merely setting this sort of facts is too strong a word, but like inputs to the world. And here, of course, to put it practically, you could say precisely these kind of things, how little is enough, which is kind of what this is relying on, like the spouting lava example earlier, or Pablo's nation. Then you can have a role, which is like more like an approach, which is like the whole gene could be about actually, or this collection of genes is my role, i.e. a character. Like I take these 3 genes and maybe I add to them and they are my character. But there could also be, I'm not sure about this, but I'm thinking role in a very general manner. They could also be an object, because the role doesn't need to be played in a way. Like nobody has to, somebody can play only the object, but they don't have to, or it could be a place or anything else. And of course it could be a rule, which is more like inserting rules to the play through the genes, even though you can have rules of play from outside the gene as well. And then the like you decided to play with them, that somebody starts the game by setting up some genes and then people generate from there. That's a rule kind of outside of the genes, but you could use the genes to like make insertions of rules as well. And then you can make goals as moves. Then ask or query is essentially a question, which there are some here. Like in the earlier meme, there is the holy altar of carrot zombies, but with a question mark. So that is a query in itself. And then like in the ask query, I also had the idea of the paint the scene mechanic, which is a stolen mechanic from some of the newer games, which is that you set the question is like, for example, how is this place dreamlike, to have a allusion to earlier conversations, and then everybody answers, and that in itself becomes a generator. After everybody answers, how is it dreamlike? After like continuing the play after that has made the dreamlike quality to be more robust. So that's the paint the scene mechanic. And then thread, which I have a lot of ideas, but I'll visit them maybe later. But this is essentially arcs, like setting things that are continuous, not just in the sense of a goal, which is certainly one of them, but more like seeing something evolving, developing. And then like on top of this, like how this is how kind of you can make the gym. Of course, there could be way more, but like if you would describe this, like here's how we can put stuff in it. Here's kind of different roles or different operations that these things that you put there could have. Congratulations, you have a gym. Or you're now able to make gyms. Now you can think of how to play with them, and this is where the play and the structures of play come in. So then you can say, okay, but actually there's many ways to play. There is, of course, you can think of turns, like, and then comes all these structures of one place one place another. I should actually add here, which is missing because I didn't get to type it, which is solo or social. But you could also have structures of like role-playing, like turn orders that somebody like a game master describes a situation, and then people can take dynamically turns on it, and this can be described to open up different ways of playing. Then you can consider the table, and one example there is like using the table like a map, like a traditional map in itself, like this, and Jim describes this place, but you could also use it like a spread, which is like tarot, is like actually we make a conceptual map, like this is future and this is past or whatever, and then we use that. Or, and of course, the table in quotation marks could work in many other ways. Then there is the concept of a hand, which is the gems that you're holding. Don't have much ideas there beyond the idea that you could have your character by multiple gems. And then setting, as I talked about already, like this opens this world of worlds, and then like you kind of narrow down the setting from there, and there's huge amounts of things you could do with that, but maybe I'll leave that for some other time. And then solo and social is this, like, because every gym is already playing because they are generative. Like if you are looking at the gym, you're getting this, that, oh, now I have to like I'm getting this entity of the dream summer and giants. I'm getting as my other ingredients that they dream into existence this blue folk, which are probably the things on the pier, and their homes into existence. Okay, I know that. I know that the blue folk raise cats. I know that 5 grown cats will merge into a giant. This is how the giants procreate, and the city populates from giants' dream worlds. So, but I know all of that, but now that's actually for me a starting ingredients and so on. So, so this is already play in itself. The gym is like game on game led, but then all of these things kind of expand of how that play can happen. Then I just, for the memory, put down oracles, which is essentially like dice are oracles. Like, but you could have people to be oracles. You don't need the dice or somebody's opinion. You could have other gems to be oracles and so on. And then roles, like you could say, like I decide to take the role of the keeper or the game master, and therefore in this site, say in Twitter or Discord, I put up these 3 genes and describe how they kind of form the situation. And then if others join in, they become players, maybe character players, maybe concept players, maybe some other players into the situation where I started as a keeper. But of course, the roles could be done in different ways. And finally, principles, which is everything is a version and therefore playable. Like if you have an image that's already a gene, if you take these approaches, if you add something to it, that's already playable, but you can always modify it. And then everything is a seed. That is, it's seed-like nature because you have to generate from it. So you have to grow it. But it's also seed to mutate, which is also the meme part, is like you could take a gene and then change it, and then it's a mutation. But it's still a growing point. So it's both a growth point and a mutation point. And so from all of that to wrap up some things. So why to make it into an Oxel? Well, think about the possibilities that, so this is proving like how an Oxel could be a larger cluster in a way. Like certainly, but it's also then open up to, well, we are playing this gene, but now we take this, say, culture of reading and combine those 2 things, or any other Oxel in itself. Like we're playing this gene, but we take this approach to nations and we combine them. So essentially it's introducing interoperability with all the other Oxels created, while it's cutting nothing away from the possibility of playing it like a game. It's just like essentially opening the ports. It's forming I/O. It's an API, general API possibility that it forms, and therefore there is considerable power in that. There's a lot of other things I could say, and I could make many apologies in the fact that the presentation in itself is very, or the expression in itself in the paper is very limited. But I do think it's promising, especially considering how little time I use for it. And it introduces these interesting considerations like this, like, okay, if you form that into an Oxel as an example, then it precisely opens this like what does it what kind of possibilities open up from playing it and other Oxels together, and all of these considerations come into play. But I talked long enough. Any useful ways to question or comment on my too long rambling?
Pablo,
This is
please.
Yeah, this is great. Before I have to go, I'm really happy about this. I mean, it's really I have many things to say, but one thing is like it's really crazy to think that this conception of games is pre-AI image generating. Like this is maybe 2 years old.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking there could be a whole pre-game game where we generate the images that we later use to make the games. So that is like an exciting prospect. Like for example, the dream reading turning into an image and then turning that into a game already seems fruitful.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I was thinking is that one thing about memes, like the traditional boomer meme, is that you recognize it as a meme because you see the network of memes it is related to, right? Like, okay, I've seen this format before, and I understand like the underlying reference and this particular variation. So I definitely think that we have to play the games to see how they acquire this network quality, right? Because they are already born in a network way,
Yes.
this like play manner.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking this is like a multi-dimensional network that can emerge from games. So that is
Yes.
really exciting. So I think we should maybe next time or whenever we feel like jump into a Miro board and just have some images and just play some games with these moves.
Yes, yes. And I do agree with you that they are kind of inherently networked and like open to networking. And the play itself always contains this quality of like opening network like connections, making associations and whatnot. And there I think actually this is a particular power. There's like you said, memes are defined partly of their presence in a network or network of networks and subnetworks of it. But here the power is kind of amped up because it kind of correlates with the setting. You don't have to make it correlate with the setting. But once they start connecting, they almost can behave like lands. Uh, they can behave in other ways as well, but they can also turn that into very much more playable. It's not just you vaguely thinking all these are connected. It's like I can play with these connections, essentially.
Amazing, incredible. Leo, you have to say something before I go. I would like to hear you.
Yeah, no, this is just it's really resonating. I like it. It's a good frame around just the meme gene thing is great. It's resonating a lot with some stuff I've been doing with generator functions, which share a lot of interesting qualities with this kind of thing, allowing. Yeah, but I guess yeah, I don't know. I'm more just like thinking about. I guess I have a question. Also, you went off into head tail. There is that a computer science reference you're making to arrays?
Mm, close to, but not quite. It's a bit of a can of worms, but I'll open it up. So the head tail is my name, but probably somebody is using similar name to same area for a particular pattern that is like ever present, like just like pervasive, which is like, when you make text, there is usually a title, whether it's a title of a book, title of a chapter, and this relation of something taking the role of a head whenever something grows into enough complexity, like description of text, here's the title for it. And that's the most archetypical, or one example archetypical form of the head tail. And of course here the head tail is the sort of like simplified to, like, if you put a title and bullet points, you can treat them like a head tail. And that is like, oh, like you're using it as a soft categorization. You don't like go all strict about this is a category, but it's like the Dream Summoner Giants, how these are treated, like the bullet points afterwards, is kind of like, oh, this is my ingredients to make Dream Summoner Giants. So that, which are a type of entity in itself. So in a very rough way, it's kind of like behaving more like a category. And it's partially using this simple head of the title versus the tail of the bullet pointed descriptions to create this function. And I think head tail structures are very useful in gems. They're not like a rule that you always have to have them, but just thinking that way is useful. So that's
It's pretty I definitely agree with that, because like yeah, I mean, like head tails in like yeah, when you have like an array or a list of items, then the head is the first thing and then the tail is the rest. And like in like the in programming languages like Scheme or Lisp or something, you've got these things called like concells. You construct like a cell of things, and you just navigate by like chopping off the head, and then like finding the tail, and then that could be the head of that could point to some other head or something. Yeah, it's just an association I'm making with what you're saying, which does resonate at least with the description you're saying, I think. So.
Yeah, and it's definitely influenced partly by like coding structures. You know, there's the head, body, and all of these, which are kind of the same structure. The reason why I picked the word tail rather than the body is because there is like something about the openness in the tail. Is like the tail is actually trailing, and this kind of a play game like environment that the tail could be always added in is an encouragement that would be a useful encouragement. So, but it's not like that I'm holding this terminology by shackles, but it's it's influenced by
No,
those.
but I totally agree. Like, I think it's fitting. Like, I like that there's this connection because it's so true, right? It's yeah.
Yeah, and it's like the thing is like I can say from like our earlier tests, actually the kind of birth moment is like Pablo said, it's 2 weeks after the first CCG, because there was this weird interaction of like having to make memes but not wanting to make memes, and so on. But anyway, so it's true that it kind of predates the like the blooming of the AI generation. But we have tried testing it, and the thing itself works. But I agree with Pablo that actually testing it, like putting it more into a practice might be very useful. There are other styles than this. This is why this is version R, because you could have like a different approach altogether. But the R is quite, it's the one I like the most because it can contain the others. It's the most flexible. Um, uh, and I think it has a lot of potential. And I even have this idea of like, okay, towards the future opening of XORG. If there is the offering of Oxel and if there is the offering of Gem, as like here's instructions how to make them, here's populated possibilities, here's populated ways of playing them, here's some examples of how people have played them, whatever there is. I mean, you never know what sparks like or what seed grows. You throw them on the ground, but it's a rather interesting thing to throw into the world because it has such a interesting cultural position that it kind of adopts everything. And like, I'm not critical of memes, by the way, through it. It actually kind of adopts a lot of meme approaches, but then makes this one switch, which is the key interaction, and changes that, and then figures out if that interaction is changed, what does it mean for the structures, but still following the kind of memetic learnings, let's say. It might be an interesting offer. That's what I'm
Yes, it's really good. It's kind of like could act as a Trojan horse of Sorgian concepts,
saying.
just because the meme is so well understood, and saying like, hey, let's play memes into existence is such an easy thing to understand, yet it takes like it has so much complexity on it. So I think it's a great offering.
But at the
Okay,
same time,
I
I feel
will
like
I will leave now. Sorry to
Yes,
interrupt,
no
but
worries. Yes,
nice not seeing you, and hope we don't see each other again very soon.
okay.
likewise.
Okay, bye.
Ciao, man.
But ciao.
Yeah, yeah,
You were saying.
this is dope. It's I've been doing a lot of relational programming lately.
Mhm.
and kind of, so I dropped the whole map structure thing. I think I was just like lazy with that whole approach to the question. But it's interesting because the relational paradigm is like super appropriate to what we're talking about.
I know, yeah.
Yeah, have you encountered relational programming?
Yes, because like I mean, like this was all like early in kind of space years, like 2016, 17. Like it was clear that I was more thinking in the relational paradigm, and therefore kind of visited those things. Like I mean, there are many takes that like, and some of the systems don't think of themselves as relational, but have relational qualities. But then, of course, there's now even relational programming that calls itself such. So yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty dope, and like yeah, like so right now you can like create, so the picture you showed, right, like in the top right corner you've got the like a set of relations, like that there is the giant next to that does the thing or something else, right? And so that whole set of relations is part of a larger relation, which is the piece, or like the image or something. I'm spitballing here. But yeah, and so like you can have pools or empty slots inside of your program where you say that anything can happen, and you can then run a query, right, or ask a question over this set of relations and generate. You're basically generating the sets of possible worlds that are like coherent game logic worlds from a base set of like relational rules, like yeah, and so there's like there, and so that kind of like, I don't know, it's the approach. I kind of like I've completely dropped the map thing. I was just lazy, like I didn't want to read it like more. I didn't want to have to go all the way, but now I'm all the way in that thing, and I think it'll be dope. Like we can just generate and synthesize like worlds, and it works on infinite streams, like infinite whatever. Like it just works, and yeah.
Yeah, like relationality is kind of naturally infinite. It has this sort of natural tendency of working with infinities, and there's many ways like in the case of a gene and that particular just an example picture, which or an example gene, which was intentionally kind of close to memes. You could be done in many other ways. Could be abstract. Could be just about abstract things. But I intentionally made it kind of like, okay, you understand memes. Now let's make a step that you can walk to genes, kind of a thing. But it's kind of informed by like multiple ways of thinking about relationality. Of course, there is like there's an inherent relationality to their play that because like even to say that they are ingredients, what it's really saying, or well, underneath it's saying is that this is not the thing, but rather the relations set up in this nexus are the thing, and then the play is playing with those relations. And of course, if it's a human playing, it might be generating, like I actually make the chants look like this, and like whatever they do. But it's inherently kind of informed by kind of inherent relationality underneath it. That's part of it. But then, as Pablo was saying, like if that's the play style, it's also like, okay, I can put two of these and say, well, these are both kind of nexuses of relation, but I'm saying now that, say, this is on the other side of the mountain and this is on the other side of the mountain. Or I can say these are two sides of the same character or the same city or the same object or whatever.
Yeah.
These are also relations. Like if I say that there's a mountain in between, well, that's a relational quality. And so is that these are the two sides of the same character. Well, that's a relational quality. And this is a natural continuation because the whole thing was already a nexus of relations. So if you're setting new relations, you're actually kind of not moving to a different operational paradigm, but you're just extending it. But then that opens up this huge array of possibilities. And then you can put the kind of operational play on top of that, which is, of course, another set of relations. Is like, oh, we play this by one place one and another place it, or we actually make our own constellations of them and then we make them into nations. And then these nations will have their own play. Like all of these are possible because of this sort of tapping into relational architecture of this underneath here.
Oh yeah, 100%, 100%. And the point you were saying about the mountain, so there's like there's three like interesting types of variables that you can put inside of a relation. And one is like a bound variable, so it's like bound to something. You say that like, oh, there is this object or something is in relation to something else in a specific way. But then there's like fresh variables, which are unbound, but they are common across relations. So, like, if you were to say that there is something in common between the mountain, right? Between there's a mountain in between something else. Like they both share this mountain thing, but you didn't want to say it was exactly a mountain, right? You could have that as like a fresh variable that isn't bound, but it's shared. So it's like glue that holds together like this web of potentiality, and which allows us to synthesize coherent worlds by then projecting into that space all the possible combinations of like what could be the glue, And then there's actually something called a wildcard. It's called a wildcard variable. Or like that's one of the way I assume there's a couple names, but I just like the fact that they're using card. And I've been running across been coming across like quite a few like programming stuff, like talks and stuff people have been giving where they use like card game stuff in their examples, which is pretty crazy. Like I don't know, it's just permeating the sphere of thinking, I think, because but and the wild card is just like completely unbound and also unique. So there's these three kinds of slots in a way, which I think is really interesting. There's three kinds of slots in the relational paradigm.
Oh, there is actually way more. I have I made some mappings. So yeah, I made some mappings from like space architectures, which I was actually kind of thinking in relation to this. So if I kind of made a kind of like, how do I like certain concepts that happen in tags in terms of relationality, but then they could be expanded. Let's put it that way. So in a way, the head tail is like a tag like relation. It's also indexical, like categorical indexical. It's like you could set a relation to be like that. This is the head. This is the category, and of course, that could be set binding on or offering. So this is the old actual potential difference. So like you can express that as an offering, which is not yet set unless the other commits to it, or it can be set as committed. So binding versus offering, actualized versus potentialized. So, and this actualized versus potentialized goes through all the different relations. Like you can set something as a wildcard as an offering in itself, like it's merely potential, like it in a way it's a pure offer. But you could also do like something as kind of like the wildcard, but with a potential relation offered. Like this, I would offer to relate to this. So, but then beyond the kind of like something relating to a head, you can say two things relating in a way equally, but then that opens up that the relation itself is defined, like this is the as condition, like as related as this. That if you like, this is even in language is like, think of this as X, like think of this as a bridge.
That's yeah, I agree with that. But those other, at least the offer stuff and those like when you're saying, oh, the wild card as an offer, as like a potential thing, we're talking about like that's still like there would still only be these three primitives, and then like these three primitive kinds of slots, like the one that is a glue but that is unnamed, and then you project what is the thing that would work to make this a coherent picture. And then you've got the one that is completely unnamed and like completely unique. And then you've got the one that's bound. But then beyond that, like all of the, like you could express the offer stuff, I think, as and like the offer for a wildcard in a specific area as another kind of relation. And then while you're unifying the program, it would figure out what is the constellation of relations that works, that makes sense. But I think those things are more the relations than the real like lot variables, I guess. Like those are like conditional kinds of things.
Well, depends on, so okay, the bound is essentially determinate relation. But how did they define the second one?
So okay, so then yeah, the bound is right, like that thing is just, it's an object, right? And then and then there's the wildcard, completely unique, you're not even naming it, but it's an empty slot of pure potentiality.
It's a slot,
right?
yeah.
And then there's the middle one.
But the slot can be, do they have like essentially a defined indeterminacy?
Yes, and that is the middle one, where you have or well actually so you can have the one where I have an indeterminate glue in a way, right? Where it's, you can think about it as like a shared point of potential unknownness. And so when we're saying like, I'm next to something and you're also next to that something, right? So we're both in relation to a shared, we've got two different relationships and we've got this shared unknown potentiality space. And that's the middle primitive type of slot.
Yeah, it has some determination to it by being next to, means that it's determined in the manner of being next to, and then it's otherwise determined. Like essentially it's a sort of potential actual, but it's in the manner that the next to is the actualized thing and the rest is potential. But you can make that gradual because like you can turn every expression potentially to, or you can turn every expression to either be actual or potential. Which is like essentially setting this sort of, well, one way to think about it, it's like potential is the offer relation, and the actual is relation that has been set. Like
It's the acceptance.
yeah. Mm,
But I don't know, because I think I think potential and actual are also, they are, I mean, I don't know, but I think they are also just relations, like, and in kind of in the same way that we're like equip or unequip an item.
oh,
or something.
everything in this system is relations. Like that is for sure. Like it's a relational system paradigm. Like certainly potential and actual are relations in and of themselves. Like and it's also like the potential and actual sets recursive quality to these relations, because like a good concrete example of this is like, let's use chess again because it's easy, everybody knows how it works.
Sure.
Is like, what is the state of the game is actual state of the game, but then you could potentially do a move of moving a knight somewhere, and in this case it would be a legal move. So that's in the potential space of chess.
Yes.
But you could also move,
moves.
yeah. So like, but this is also why it's recursive, because now you're pointing out that there is essentially almost like the next domain or the domain surrounding that sets the potential relations. But then you decide to make some other move, and that might close the potential of moving the knight, but now the actual move was, I don't know, moving a pawn, whatever.
Okay, yeah, I completely agree with you here, because then we're talking about the one of the, so what I'm trying to do right now is I'm trying to take these like this relational interpreter, and I'm trying to get it so that we can play the relations as cards into a certain collection of relations, like a world, and to then use like in mini Cameron they're called goals, but it's like the process of unification where you like take all of these relations with the three kinds of variables we were talking about and like figure out what are the possible worlds that are possible, and through the unification process. But what that kind of is it's kind of like the filter layer, right? Where you're filtering the potentiality space of what's possible, but it's a generative filter layer where you then produce another set of relations, right? And you can have this, and so that I really do like the word filter layer, because then what we're talking about also is like every move that I make is either like I create a new world where I add more relations to like my base set, which also means that we've got like an immutable data, like this is an immutable data structure, but or that I'm adding a filter layer, right? And that every single move I make is essentially a filter layer that then produces the new potentiality space.
Yes, like I sometimes call this like filter layer architectures, which is kind of like a paradigm shift from the like traditional architectures. Even the abstract ones are kind of object architectures, like, or people's approach to them is kind of objectualization. But the filter layer is it doesn't lose the possibility of working like an object, but even that's kind of layer. But then there is the filter quality is always there, because even if you make that constellation, that can work as a filter for others. And then there's possibilities of thinking of these in particular domains, which opens this sort of what is actualized in this domain versus the domain surrounding it might set the potential range. And so like there's a lot of possibilities to play with that. But do you have somewhere like Do you have a web link or other words where they describe these three variables?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Like I can, yeah, I'll send something, but yeah, mini Cameron, but there's also like I'm really playing around with this JavaScript implementation of it, which is crazy because we then have like the object-oriented stuff in there. I'm also reaching out to these people because like I think that'd be great to bring into Exa and stuff too.
Mhm.
But yeah, called Ramo, Ramo. It's really dope. And like, yeah, so my goal right now is like get into relations. I'm trying to create like this I'm trying to wrap right now, the Ramo implementation is synchronous, and I want to make it asynchronous. By like, well, at least I want to make it concurrent by wrapping the worlds that you're unifying and generating inside of a generator function, which allows us to do some crazy shit. And then, so yeah, get the card, play, like if you imagine the user interface of this thing, I like the relation you play as a card, and then the into a circle, right? Like, so imagine a circle, you put a relational card inside of there, and you're just building a collection of relations that are an open space of potentiality around the thing. You just click, hey, I want to add a filter, like I want to add a goal. Or at least they're called goals, but we can name them more exotically, like filter layers or different thing, or like move or whatever. Like you could frame anything as kind of this closing, just defining, molding, and shaping and generating the new space. And so what's really great is that I can associate the relation. I could create a relation between the input outputs on the keyboard or on my screen, like clicking and stuff, and I can generate what are the possible, like I can even represent like DOM objects and styles and stuff like that as relations. And then we can kind of generate, like synthetically generate the interfaces that we want on the fly.
Yeah, it is an interesting ground, like in itself, like I mean, the cultural paradigm of relational systems is underexplored. It's maybe a good word. It's and it goes beyond, like it's certainly useful that there is this whole exploration of relationality in terms of programming, but it's also like I think some of these game structures are proving that it's also like it's a paradigm of thought as well, like which is which creates a different situation. Like in the case of the gym, it's like it's constantly working in situation where not all the relations are set, but they're more like operations which can set relations, and that the relations can exist in kind of like they can move like some relation that is set might later shift, etc., and so on, like which is a different way of structuring than, say, much of call it roughly Western thinking is. And I think there is a lot of potential in that as well, and that's kind of underlining this underexplored nature of this area, whether it's through like structures of programming or structures of thinking or some other.
The point you're making also on operations is key, right? Because it's and well, that like that's part of the thing, that because even the operations are relations, except
Yes.
when we start thinking about things in terms of these three kinds of like you've either got the bound variable, or you've got the unbound, or you've got the like the glue kind of thing, or you've got the wildcard, right? And then an operation we tend to associate with just as a thing between two wildcards, or an unbound thing, right? When in fact an operation is just also a relation.
Yes.
It's just, and when we normally think about relation, we are thinking about between stuff, right? Or between whatever. I don't know, but I don't know, man. I'll send you the library because it's giving me a lot of clarity, I feel, on like on this. And man, plus this library isn't even like they got so like this is, I'll send you Rambo, which is like the JavaScript implementation, which is built particularly because we get the whole objects being generated. We can synthetically generate worlds as like contained full of JavaScript objects that are in relationship to each other, which is just absurd. And no one's using this. This repo has like 16 stars on GitHub.
Yeah,
And
it's weird, like how on the side of this is, and it's definitely true that every operation is a relation. That's like quote unquote natural to relational systems, that operations and like there's no really this difference between things that are active and things that are passive. Like it doesn't set like verbs and nouns kind of difference naturally to itself.
yeah. So I'm thinking like if it would be interesting. Yeah, I don't know. Like I guess I don't know. And that is like, because this Ramo thing is just an implementation of the thing inside of Scheme, or Mini Cameron, or like
Mhm.
which has like a bunch of different implementations. But that thing is crazy. People have created like relational meta interpreters that are written where an interpreter is written as a relation inside of this relational programming language, capable of interpreting the relational programming language, and it's written as a relation.
Mhm.
And that's crazy. I mean, like, I don't know. It's just been blowing my mind.
Yeah, it is powerful. Like this is why I got interested in this. And it's also like, of course, there was like a natural, not transition, but like a perspective shift. Like games, if you're not looking at the surface, but like the design of the games are inherently relational in nature. Like if you take a board game, the kind of designer of a board game has to think in relational terms, even if they don't use these paradigms or these kind of conceptualizations of them. But every practical thinking of making that design is dependent on relational, because every move they think that could be in the game has to be made in terms of its potential effects. But it also has to be done in terms of its actual effects on the actuality of the board. So you have to move in, like nothing is an operation purely, but nothing is like um, um, objectual purely. So like these kind of structures, like the approach in terms of relation are something that is surprisingly natural in structural game design.
Yeah. Yeah. Just looking at like this thing, Badiou, he wrote like some stuff on math. Like I've never read it. I've never really read much of Badiou anyway. Although like I liked what I've read, but yeah, the guy was talking about how like all of ontology is math for Badiou, and it's, and like I don't know to the extent I wish I agree with that. but it was an interesting take, a very hot take, that's for sure. That like ontology is mathematics, and that like there is. He was talking about how his general position, I think, was just like that we've got that the world is generated through this truth procedures of and unification of like partially ordered sets of something. But the point, when I was listening to this talk, the guy was giving, I was like, holy shit, like it's not exactly the same thing, but it's totally aligned. And then there was like this guy writing about propagators. The propagator model of computation is so crazy too. And that's also like maybe even more crazy than Mini Cameron. But there is no good library out there right now.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I have to check that as well. Like, yeah, the thing with, like, I have a problem with, like, the East game that is played with, the sort of setting of that the world, like, is generated from sets, or like in a way, like it's certainly a valid reading, but like if he would be fully relational, he would not start from the ease of it. Like, yeah, like it's certainly like it's a potentially fertile model, and certainly useful in its kind of differences, but you don't have to like to say this is the hill of truth. Like this is my constant problem in why when I'm reading his like brick-sized books, I get like pushed off at some point. It's like I'm not like disagreeing with the usefulness of their approach. I'm disagreeing with how it's being argued. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but man, that's the yeah, I don't know, because I kind of so that's like one of the things like the guy is saying, right? Like is we've got mathematics is like is purely like descriptive in a way. And that but that the reason that he wants to do like that set theory is the thing for him is that sets are things that the only all sets are composed of other sets except for the set that contains nothing, and so he's like interested in this super like I don't know relational thing, but when of like how he's interested in the fact that through the lens of set theory, I can basically play the is game with like all of everything, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with category theory, we're looking more at something that's like, well, every category is like a whole universe of discourse, right? And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm talking way out of my depth here. But these are just kind of some of the things that have been bobbling around in my head with all of this stuff. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, this is and it's also like said, like I think like Badio is a worthwhile contributor, and also like the style of argumentation irks me sometimes, but also that has led me to a position that I shouldn't talk about it at length because I don't have enough of.
Then whatever.
Yeah. Like that like yeah, like let's leave it. But nevertheless, like and currently I'm actually kind of like, for me the interesting possibilities is not to disdain none of any of these, set theory and so on. But I don't think it's an accident that whenever new models are made, for example, the sort of relational programming approaches, new approaches appear. What kind of, for me, is interesting is that the architectural dimension is certainly not explored enough. And it's not a question of now setting to set theory as architecture and kind of like just moving the mountain there. But for me, the more interesting part is actually kind of coming up with new architectures, often very small ones. And none of those will set the truth either, but they are rather kind of proving the sort of that rather than moving the thinking only within the frame, you're moving the thinking and processing by changing the frame itself, to put it in rough terms.
Mm-hmm. I'm interested. So like I think like maybe throughout this conversation too, like you've also made like a bunch of connections, I'm sure, in terms of like the gene concept. Because I'm thinking like these collections of like relations, right? These little things. Those are those are genes, I think, right? Like these little collections of relations, and I can send them to other like generator functions or whatever, and they could construct. I could say, hey, here is the gene that I'm sending from one, or this collection of relations from one area I'm sending to another, use them in order to construct a new latent space of potentiality on like that isn't that wasn't like predefined there before, right? So like that's why I'm also like trying to combine the generator function stuff with the relational Ramo stuff, because then we've got the ability to do this like asynchronous message passing composition kind thing.
Yeah, agreed. Like for the gene, like in the earlier talks, like it started with me like maybe making something that was like slightly tongue-in-cheek, but then like I even said, and that was kind of what Pablo was referring to, is like actually the structure is a certain perspective that can comprise all the structural points that we've been playing around with. And what is interesting about it is like where does the cultural proposition land? Like landing close to memes is an interesting place to land in terms of awareness, communication, and whatnot. But it also like it's not just that landing point, but it's also like tapping into this sort of culture of like breeding endlessly new ones that memes have, and then the kind of affinity that memes have for games, like as a culture. So then showing actually them as much more playable is a kind of interesting point to communicate or put the wormhole, which then leads to all these structural possibilities. So it's certainly not the only way to communicate it, but it's an interesting way to communicate it because of its cultural landing point, so to speak. And also like from that, in a way flippant, but in a way flippant possibility, not the structural possibilities are not lost, but they also come colored with the sort of like let's say an expressive culture that could be meme-like in all its dirtiness and sloppiness, but these can be benefits.
I like it too because whereas like the programmable offer, right, it's like the symbol. I mean, I guess like the programmable offer, right? It's more static, right?
Yes.
Whereas here with when we're talking about game meme or generative meme, maybe.
Yeah, that's what it plays with. It was like Peem doesn't sound as cool as Gem. I could have checked. Play would have been better word, but game, game meme, gameable meme, intentionally wanted to avoid gamification. But the key anchor is the Gem as a word being very close to meme, but different, and the G reminding of games.
But so the thing with the all right, so it's like it's more. So imagine in JavaScript, right, with these generator functions that produce generator objects, these objects, right, can talk, they can pass messages to each other in programmatic ways. And completely asynchronously, with the ability to even like perform like, it's also lazy evaluation in JavaScript. And so what if I am but because they're also objects, and the Ramo version of Mini Cameron works with objects, you can also do this whole relational like synthesis of generator objects. So you can produce and like unify networks of generator objects that are communicating and internally, right? Like programmatically passing messages to each other, potentially containing relational space.
Yes. No, it's certainly interesting, and the whole area of Ramo, like particularly because it's JavaScript,
That's
and
the
because
crazy part.
Yeah, and then secondly because like however you slice them, actually these relational architectures are rather simple. Like they are powerful, but the kind of setting them up is actually rather simple. It's really much more a shift of position than building a cathedral, like like million points and so on, which then I can imagine, not having dived into Rama, but I can imagine that in itself, like this powerful position, really doesn't need many building blocks. But that's a power in itself.
It's pretty like it's in a lot of ways it's confusingly simple, right? Because it's like you're not actually doing anything other than writing down relations and then running a collection of them inside of another relation. That's it. Like you're not doing any crazy stuff. You're not even like writing custom functions or anything. Like you're just doing that. And so I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, I really think that give it like a month or something, but I think I can get us and I'd love your help on this, by the way, as well. If you want to collab, work on some Ramo stuff together, I'd absolutely love your insight.
Yeah. I'll definitely read myself more deeply into Rama version of this.
Dope. Yeah, I also I ended up I wrote some stuff on like I'll send you some stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I think, dude, give it a month, and I think we can get like a solid relationally generated front end with generic input outputs for this. And
yeah.
I think it's really like it's within grasp. Like I'm saying a month, but I think it might be we might have something like next week. I don't know, but I'm saying a month, but dude, I'm like excited right now.
Yeah, it's definitely worthwhile pursuing because I mean, of course, I have a lot of belief in the kind of expressive power towards this, and particularly expressive power that positions its power very differently than, let's say, more traditional approaches. So it can really reveal this sort of possibilities that are simply not in the kind of logics of the traditional paradigms of architecture. So yeah, I agree. Let's explore that.
And we got to think about how to go beyond the screen, right?
Mhm.
But also retain, like we can use the screen and get that done, but I'm also interested in exploring like how do we interact with this kind of relational runtime, this collaborative relational runtime in other ways than just screen mediated thing. Like I think it's so important that we figured that out.
Yeah, this is true. And I do think there are ways, like structurally speaking, like thinking everything really as a projection, like nothing is an ultimate surface, but a projection is one of them. But I think pragmatically, this is one of the reasons why I've kind of kept the interest to the gym like over the couple of years, is because like of course, as a kind of surface to meet, it might be for many people easier to walk through that than many more esoteric surfaces in itself. But then secondly, I do think it might hold, and this might be proof in the pudding, but I think it might hold some ideas towards like how these kind of things, like the code side of things, could have also relations outside the screen, so to speak. Like, um, like I have some hunches of why that is, uh, but I like playing with these things that might be in code in a kind of, roughly speaking, mimetic approach. It might be one way of like isn't it this sort of freedom of making a meaning in itself and then coming back to code from another angle. Um, I mean, these are yet to be discovered, but I do think such possibilities exist, and this kind of gym direction might be one way to communicate it, also in a kind of like with affinity to current culture and people in it.
Yeah, true. Yeah, we gotta figure out. We also gotta figure out like the because it's one thing right now. The generator functions internally act as kind of a multi-agent system. It's like I'm basing it on like an actor model of computation. And so we're kind of simulating a network of players who are playing this thing, but it would be great to like, yeah, I don't know, talk to Jorge or something and try to work on how might we build a play implementation of this kind of thing on top of like DNP type stuff.
Yeah, I think in some ways like we can think like I think first would be to find an implementation that can be functional early.
Yeah, dude.
Like
Let's hop on a call. I'll send you some stuff and like let's hop on a call like later this week. I'm pretty
yeah,
sure I'll have like some stuff we could like play around with on a call or something.
yeah, let's do that. Okay, all right. And with that, we can press stop on the recording. This is the end that you get. Not necessarily the best end, but it's an end.
Bye-bye.
Because now it ends. Bye.